Hi, and welcome to the Writer's Block, everybody. I'm Cameron. We have with us tonight Jeff
Hello.
and Steve and Mason
What to do?
and Erica. Today, we are going to be talking about how to create a good writing group. This is something that was actually one of the first topics that we discussed when we were talking about creating our own YouTube, because it's something that we feel strongly about because we've found something that works pretty well for us. And so I am going to lay out some ideas and some thoughts of things that have worked well for us in the hopes that they will be useful for you folks as well. As always, this is only advice. Take whatever works for you, ditch the rest, and we will not be offended. I will say credit where credit is due. Nearly all of us in this group are graduates of Brandon Sanderson's master class that he teaches at Brigham Young University once a year. And that's how most of us found each other. And a lot of these rules and ideas that I'm going to talk about do come from his class and his advice to us as we were first creating groups. So I want to make sure that we're not just presenting this as if it's our genius that is making this happen, but rather we've taken the principles that he gave us and adapted them to our own purposes and needs. So let's talk about where to start. Okay, what do you do? You're a writer. You would like to have some people reading your stuff and giving you feedback, because otherwise you're just stuck in your hole of a room alone and depressed. Wait, that's me. How do you find other writers? How do you get started? Well, in our case, we started in a class together, right? And so that part was done for us. It was easily, he split us up into groups and said, who's working on similar stuff? And we sorted ourselves into groups that way. And he gave us some rules to start with. If you do not have a writing class that you are a part of, although there are plenty of writing classes around, and I would recommend that you avail yourself of whatever is available to you. If you don't have one of those, what are some other ideas, guys, folks, for where we can find writers to work with?
Can I tell you where not to?
Yes, please.
Please do.
So I once went to one Jeff in Astoria. It was the Astoria library, and that I found through meetup.com. I don't even know if meetup.com is even a thing anymore, but it was meetup.com. It was the basement of the Astoria library. And apparently the basement of the Astoria library must be abutting the R train right there, because like every 5 minutes or so there would just be a huge rumbling sound that we all had to contend with. And like a guy brought his like 1,200 page like magnum opus, and he's like, I'm only comfortable with y'all reading this if you read the whole thing. I mean, it was pretty nuts, but I think that's maybe a product of being in Queens and on meetup.com.
So you bring up a good point there. You want to find writers who are somewhere within at least your general wheelhouse on topic matter, in genre, but also in terms of level of development. There are no bad writers, just writers who need to write more, in my opinion. I may revisit that at some point, I don't know. However, you want to be getting feedback from somebody whose writing you like and respect, or otherwise, who cares what they think, right? So there may be some use in vetting each other's writing sort of mutually before you begin, whether this is somebody that you find on a discussion board, a writing discussion board, or a Reddit board. Or another idea that I was going to throw out there is if you have done NaNoWriMo before, National Novel Writing Month, there are frequently, you can find local meetups, maybe not this year with COVID and everything, but you can find some other local writers to connect with and talk to. At any rate, vetting each other, having sort of a set up vetting process first to say, do we want to read each other's stuff on a regular basis and provide feedback for each other is probably a good place to start. Any ideas about that, folks?
Yeah, if I can hop onto that, I think um, maybe one of the big principles of this is like be willing to try a lot of things, but also be willing to kind of bail, for lack of a better term. Hopefully, you handle that in a respectful manner, and don't just disappear on people frequently, because that's kind of a little bit lame and can be hurtful to people, right? But also, thanks to studies in college, I was in a number of different writing groups, many of which were required due to a particular class or what have you. And also like local library writing groups and things like that, you know. Um, and I stuck with almost none of them. Just because as time went on, it became really apparent that like the people that I was interacting with were at a different place than I was, or there just wasn't going to be a level of commitment and consistency, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And at some points, I've also been the one that has been left as well because I wasn't committed enough. Which, you know, woe is me, I suppose. But I think maybe like, I think there are a lot of places where you can find a writing group, right? But that doesn't guarantee that you will. You could find a functional writing group at your local library. You could find a functional writing group in a subreddit, maybe the fantasy subreddit, the sci-fi subreddit, something like that, right? You could find a functional writing group on Facebook somehow. I don't know. It's possible. Zuckerberg finds a way. There are lots of places where you could, but I think generally speaking, the vast majority of the time you won't. But you may find a writer that you really connect with, right? Maybe you find a writing group that just doesn't work, but you do find a writer within that writing group that you gel with. Maybe at a different place, you find a writing group that you just entirely don't like, but they have some rules or some structure in place that you like. Writing at the end of it, I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I'm sorry I've been going on for a little bit at this point, but it's an outreaching thing, right? We share our writing with people. And also when it comes to writing group stuff, this is probably one of the most outreaching aspects of this effort, right? You have to get out there, you have to talk to people, and you have to deal with it when the stuff between you and those people don't necessarily work out. So for some people that can be really daunting, and understandably so. But I think at the end of it, that's kind of the biggest thing, is just put yourself out there time and time again until you find something that works. And if you keep doing it, you will find something.
I think wherever you find folks, like Mason's saying, having some clear expectations and clear communication with them as to what you're hoping to get out of them and give them in return is crucial. So saying, you know, you find a writer that you like, whether it's at the library group or an NaNoWriMo group or in a class that you're taking or whatever, say, hey, I'm wanting to start a regular writing group. Would you be willing to exchange some writing with me to see if we have anything interesting to say to each other? And then being very willing to just say, you know, I think you're maybe in a different place than I am, or I just didn't connect with the looking for the folks. Awkward conversations to have, but you don't do yourself any favors trying to connect with folks that you're not going to want to keep connecting with. And I think all of us here in this group have had experiences of writing groups that have sort of collapsed in on themselves one way or the other. This one has been going strong for a couple of years now, and I feel like we've been talking about finding folks for a while now, but we are going to get into some of the things that we want to, some of the structures that seem to be useful for us here in just a minute. But the structure doesn't matter if it's not people that have similar goals, similar outlooks, that you want to talk to on a regular basis, that you can be friends with. You don't have to get along all the time. You don't have to like everything that they say. But if you hate everybody in the group, you're not likely to go back.
I will say sometimes I think there's value in a kind of handing it to anybody, right? And even people that are like kind of wildly in different spots, or even I've had experiences of non-writers where the feedback's just totally different and actually really valuable, right? Because your readership is not going to be a bunch of other writers in general. So like sometimes that can be like really helpful if you're open to just kind of receiving that. Of course, you don't have to act on it, you know, but just being able to see how your stuff bounces off very different types of readers can be valuable. And I found the thing that's always been most important for a writing group is that people are just open to the feedback. If at any point somebody gets kind of like clenched or like not open to the feedback, that's when things sort of fall apart in the group.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Just
all right, so maybe let's talk a little bit about how we have been able to structure our group so that we can function usefully on a week-to-week basis. Okay. I'm sorry, did I miss any feedback from anybody else? I don't skip anybody.
I was just going to jump in and talk a little bit about finding writing groups, especially in this digital age where people are stuck indoors. So these days, there's a decent number of booktubers or author YouTubers, and also authors, writers on Discord and on Twitch and stuff like that. Plus the Reddits that were mentioned. So there really are a lot of places these days where you can get a group together. There's relatively frequent posts, for instance, on like Fantasy Writers Reddit, of people saying, hey, we need another person for our group, or would someone like to start a group, that type of thing. And there's also a lot of people posting their writing. So you can even get to see samples of how people are writing, if it's in the same genre as you, same style, if you'd be interested in getting their feedback. As Steve says, there's definitely advantages to getting feedback from, anyone at any stage, or even people who aren't writers. But trying to find other people that are as committed to the process to keep doing it, which is another huge thing, finding a group that's going to keep going and not die out and quit. But I just want to put out there as places to look, as Reddits, as were mentioned. If you do follow any like author tubers, if they have a Discord, oftentimes there will be people within that Discord that want to make a group, and same for Twitch. A lot of the people that are on Twitch will have Discords, and the people within those Discords will talk and make groups. I used to, do some streaming on Twitch as a writer, and there were definitely, I was told about other ones like that, and I had one like that briefly, not as a writing group, for just a place for people to talk. But a lot of times, if there's a place where writers are talking, then those writers who are talking can end up deciding, some of them, to make a writing group with each other. I would just say, as someone who has been part of online writing groups, I was part of an online writing group for years that was going on for a while and then stopped and then came back. It can be harder, I find personally, to keep that momentum going without the interaction, that like face-to-face interaction, or at least a verbal interaction with each other, like in real time. So if you are finding that you're part of a couple of writing groups that seem to be dying out, one thing you might want to try is the face-to-face interaction, just having been part of ones that are met exclusively online versus ones and by online I just mean in forums and talking with each other in a forum and stuff like that, versus actually meeting at a regular time. So
I have to say, it is essential for me, our weekly Discord meetings where we can see each other's faces. And I know that I need to have my stuff submitted by a certain time in order to get it read, and I need to read everybody else's stuff. It provides some structure and some incentive for me to stick with my writing that I would be sorely lacking otherwise. I write more and I write better because I've got a group waiting for me every week.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, the face-to-face interaction is important enough for me that since we're meeting over video chat for the time being, we'll talk about how we're structured in a minute, but when we do the first segment of our writing group where we talk about things we like from that week's chapter or submission, I don't open up a new tab to take down notes in a Word document. I get a piece of scratch paper, whatever I can, because I need to be looking at people's faces while they're giving me feedback, because that's the validation. That's what I'm here for.
That's a good idea. You should do that.
And I think the deadlines are also really important, but that's not so much a face-to-face thing, but yeah, just another positive aspect of a writing group.
For sure. Okay, so let's talk about how we actually manage our meetings. Okay, so and again, a lot of these guidelines came from Brandon Sanderson, and they seem to have worked very well for us, although some of them we have adapted to our own uses. It is important to have a time limit for each person who has submitted their work that week and had it read by everybody else, so that everybody gets their fair share of time. With the size of group that we've got at this point, we usually keep our feedback for every person to 10 to 15 minutes, usually more 15 minutes, where someone is keeping time, and usually it's Jeff these days. Sometimes I'll pick up the timer, but there is always someone keeping time and keeping track and letting people know, hey, we're about to bump up against time. If there's any last things to say, now is the time to do it. And then when it's time, you know, you can let it bleed a minute or two over if there's still a good discussion going. But at a certain point, you've got to say, okay, let's cut it off. We can continue this over chat if need be later. If there's still things that need to be resolved, we want to give everybody their time so that nobody feels cheated at the end of the day. You know, you want to make sure that everybody who is contributing gets their 15 minutes, right? For lack of a better term. Now, the way that we usually split that 15 minutes up is, and I feel like this is one of the very important things, one of the reasons why this group has worked very well for us so far. The first half, and in fact more than half of the time, we spend only on the things that we liked. So we actually split up our feedback time, so for the first half of the time, we only talk about the things that are positive about what was submitted. And we leave any mention of criticisms, and in fact, we don't even call them criticisms, we call them second looks, right? Because we're all sensitive creatures, we're all artists here, we know what it's like to get our feelings offended, and our books are our babies. So we want to be careful to be speaking positively and front load the positivity to sort of inoculate you against the criticism. I know that I need this. Maybe other people can handle it better, but I need to hear what's awesome about what I've written, because otherwise I just start to think that I stink. And so we spend, I think at this point, we spend 8 minutes on on our likes, and then 7 minutes on our second looks, right? Or maybe 6 minutes, and then we leave a minute for questions at the end, if the submitter has any questions. That structure allows for, that organization, I feel like really allows us to feel good about ourselves, to feel good about our group members, and to not get too worked up over any point that we're maybe stuck on because we've heard all the good stuff that the person criticizing us has said previously. I feel like that makes all the difference in terms of me being able to accept the criticism and hear it and internalize it so that I can use it.
I think likes are important, not just for a sense of validation and to keep you going, but because they tell you what is working well and what your reader expectations are. I was workshopping a book with this group that had a love triangle in it, and towards the beginning I thought both the love interest and the love triangle were viable options, but there was clear unrevocable support for the first love interest. So I knew this is the only guy I can conceivably have her stay with at the end, because nobody else thinks the other guy has a fighting chance.
I was just going to say, I think a couple other quick important points is that while we're doing the likes and second looks, for the most part, the person who is receiving the likes and second looks is not speaking, because the idea is they should mainly just be receiving said information. You don't want to get into like a battle about something. And then we do give that time at the end. If they do have, a burning question or something they want to ask, they can. But I almost feel like that part's optional. We've more just kind of added it in. I think it's nice. Don't get me wrong. I like it. But our foundation initially was definitely more just like receive the likes, receive the second looks. And also with the second looks, sometimes, well, I should say I've seen it happen before in a group where instead of second looks, it is just criticism. It is just like, I didn't like this, or this was bad, or I think you should change this. And the second look framework is phrased as such because the idea behind the second looks, at least for the most part, is supposed to be the reader reaction. Like, I was surprised that the character didn't spend time feeling sad. Like I thought they would be sad after losing their mom, and they just moved on with stuff. And that was weird to me. So it's not saying that like you're bad or you're a bad writer because you made this emotion not land as much as the reader expected. It's more just saying, this was my reaction to reading your work. And I think also framing it as more reader reactions makes it easier to digest, because there's not that same judgment there. It's just like, I felt this way about what you wrote. So.
Yeah. And I do want to go off what Jeff just said regarding not speaking during the second looks and the likes. A writing group, I would say, and some people will disagree with me on this, a writing group, I would say, is a place that you go to receive constructive criticism and feedback. It's not a place where you go to justify yourself to a group of people. You can do that with anyone. You do not need to waste a writing group's time on that. And furthermore, if you're in a mentality where you need to justify your writing to these people, then either A, maybe that writing group isn't the right group for you, or maybe B, you don't really want a writing group as much as you want just people to tell you that you're doing a good job. Which, there's nothing wrong with that, right? If that's what you're looking for, I see what Steve's doing. If that's what you're looking for from your writing, find people that will tell you your writing's good and enjoy it, right? But also recognize that no one ever improved by just getting positive feedback. And so if you're looking for positive feedback, get it, enjoy it, recognize that you're probably not going to improve as much. And if you're going into a writing group, getting constructive criticism that makes you uncomfortable and you want to push back on it, maybe take a second, take a breather, and realize that you've got an opportunity to really step up if you want to.
Yeah, I would say, go ahead.
I was just going to say the biggest difference between writing groups that worked and didn't were that speaking, not speaking rule, in my experience. The ones where people spoke during the feedback, those groups fell apart immediately. The ones where you didn't, they tended to stick together better. And for all the reasons that you all said. And I also think that, like, one thing that isn't discussed enough is that as writers, we need to be pretty tough, right? Because if you haven't gotten to the point where you're getting rejected yet, it's coming very, very, very soon. So it feels like the writing group almost is a good way to kind of like steel yourself for that. Ooh, let me get this kind of like softer criticism now and learn how to take that and use it for the value that it gives you, because the rejections later are going to be much harsher.
Yeah.
I will say the very few
sorry,
times,
Cameron, you go.
Thank you. The very few times that we've had hurt feelings or heated words in this group, it's been because we violated this rule, and somebody who's having a hard time with the feedback that they're receiving starts to argue. I have been that person, so I no judgment of anybody. It's easy enough to do, but it never helps.
Yeah. Which, I mean, for that reason, I think like clear communication is integral to this, right? Like if you guys set up the rules and don't maintain them, you haven't really communicated what you want, right? And then if you guys set up rules and someone's feelings get hurt, that's, you gotta talk. right? I remember, Cameron, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember a couple of years ago, we were concluding one of Cameron's books, and I gave some feedback that really did not jive well with Cameron, right? But he and I talked afterward, right? And I'm grateful that Cameron is the kind of guy that I could talk with after that, who would be frank with me, right? Like we were. I think he was pretty candid with me about how he felt. I think I was pretty candid with him, and I respect him all the more for it. So clear communication, I think, is important.
Yeah, and occasional blowouts, I mean, in any relationship of any kind, are bound to occur. But so long as you can talk about it and respect each other and be kind, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for Mason, it fixes it. You can get over it, and your group continues to be useful.
And I just wanted to toss out there real quick, we're talking a little bit about, as the person receiving criticism, it's important to be quiet and receive and really learn it. I do just want to put the shoe on the other foot and say it can be tricky to just always say, here's what I felt, here was my reaction, as opposed to, oh, but what should happen is this. And it's very easy to fall into that sort of prescriptive. We're writers. So your writer brain is already like, oh, but this could happen. And if the person that you're giving feedback to is, you've worked together long enough, or they've given the okay that, no, like I'm actually having problems with this scene, I would like to hear your suggestions for a fix. Great, awesome. But I will say that one of the things that stuck with me, and I have not always been successful, was definitely, Brandon talking about not prescribing in your reactions. Just say it's your act, not what should happen. Don't make it your own book. It is their book. You're just trying to say how you felt as a reader going through it. And they can always ask for more.
I will say I'll accept any prescription that y'all want to give. If you have good ideas, I will steal them. I am fine with that.
One of the most common phrases that gets heard in our group meetings is, now this is prescriptive, so feel free to ignore it if you want. But, so yeah, it does happen sometimes, but I agree with Jeff and with Brandon, who said it first, that generally speaking, trying to avoid the prescriptive feedback is a great place to start.
I think it is significant that we call our constructive criticism second looks and not things I didn't like or things to change or things to improve on, because they really are that, things to look at for a second time. And sometimes people can give you that feedback and you go, oh, so you didn't like that character? Well, good. I know better than you. I know that character is going to be a villain later on, so that's why I did it. And so we're not telling you what to change, what to do better. It's, this is my reaction. You can do with it what you will. And I make almost every change that is suggested or alluded to by the group. The only times when I usually don't make a change is either I have a strongly held opinion, or group members are pushing back against each other and they have conflicting opinions, or most frequently, I know how this book ends and they don't yet, but I can tell from their feedback where a reader would be at this point in the book.
Absolutely. A couple of final suggestions that we have tried to stick with in terms of our structure is having a hard deadline for when submissions need to be in each week, so that people don't feel like they're getting slapped upside the head with somebody's submission at the last second, asked to read it unfairly, right? So we generally have our deadline be 3 to 4 days in advance of when we're going to meet each week. And we tend to be pretty strict about that. There have been exceptions where somebody's like, hey, it's been a crazy week, can I have an extra day? And we're fine with that. But generally speaking, you have your stuff in by Sunday night, or you just read everybody else's stuff that week and participate, and you'll get your turn the following. The other thing that we try to have rules on, we haven't been nearly as good at this, is the length of submissions. Once again, you're trying to be respectful so that everybody has a chance to read everybody's submission and it's not unfair. I am the worst at this. Everybody in the group knows I give submissions that are thousands of words too long, and I'm so sorry. I'm so bad at it. I just, I don't know what to do. Everybody's really nice about it. But one of the things that I do always say is, I recognize that this is too long. please don't feel like you need to finish it. Like if you don't get done, I'm not going to be offended. Give me your feedback on whatever you were able to read. Like if you've only got time for 1,000 words for me, then give me 1,000 word feedback on the first 1,000 words, and I'm good, because I recognize that I'm violating our own rules. Generally speaking, we started off in the early days with a 1,000 to 2,000 word limit for our submissions. That has since grown. I would say the average submission for our group per week is between 2,000 and 3,500 words, maybe 4,000 words. This can differ depending on your group and how many people you have, which is one final thing to discuss. What's the right size of group, right? Now, if all of us in this group are here every week, we've got 8 people.
It's a lot.
And that's a little too big, honestly. We don't have time enough every week to go through 8 submissions. Generally speaking, it usually works out that only 4 or 5 of us have submitted on any given week. And that's sort of the top limit of what we're able to give ourselves in terms of time spent reading and time spent giving feedback in our group meetings. Once again, I think the rule here has to be clear communication with group members. If you're willing to have a 3 or 4 hour group meeting every week, then you can have more people and you can have longer subs, and it's no big deal. We tend to crap out after a couple of hours and just be out of energy. So those are just some general guidelines in terms of what has worked for us. Anything to say about that, anybody?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that this is another one of those instances where clear communication is important, right? Because when the group became the size that it is right now, because it didn't start out this way, we were only, for a prolonged period of time, we were only 4 or 5, and then we grew to 7, and then we grew to 8, right? And so when that happened and it became apparent that the group, more people could likely be submitting, we talked about, okay, how are we going to respond to this, right? Like how much time is going to be allotted for likes? How much time is going to be allotted for dislikes? When can this work, right? Because I think more, like just as important as us meeting every week is that we almost always meet at the same time, right? So we also like talked about figuring out what that time was going to be and things like that. So I think like you can pull off an 8-person writing group, but you need to talk about it. You need to be ready to adjust. You got to communicate.
All right, we are just about down to the wire on our time. Do we have any last comments from anybody?
Just good luck.
Yeah, find your folks. This group has been one of the main reasons that I've kept writing over the last couple of years, and it's made all the difference for me. And I hope the same holds true for everybody else here. At any rate, we are just about out of time, so thank you for joining us. We hope some of this. Oh, I'm sorry, Erica, go ahead.
If there's anything I can say, it's that after I've joined writing groups, there's no going back. I had a period of time when I didn't have access to frequent internet, and I still kept in correspondence with these guys. I still wanted to come back to this. This was one of my #1 goals I wanted to get back to. Writing groups are, there's nothing like them. There's no other way to match this value, and I'm just grateful for these guys and everything we've had to offer each other over the years.
Absolutely.
Find your people.
Yeah. All right, that's it for us this week, folks. So thank you for joining us, and until next time, Blockheads. Bye.